Thank you for finding the NSE podcast on YouTube. To find links for our online hospitality security training, check out the video description below. Enjoy the Nightlife Security Podcast.
Hey, this is Fry from the Yellow Rose in Austin, Texas, and you are listening to Nightclub Security Podcast at ED Expo 2013.
Welcome to the Nightclub Security Podcast, a professional resource for the nightclub security industry. Whether you're a nightclub bouncer, guard, owner, or operator, this is the podcast for you. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. You listen to the Nightclub Security Podcast. I am Manny Marquez, and I'm here with nightclub industry expert Robert C. Smith. Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, buddy.
So we're getting back on the mics in the studio for our 8th podcast. And just want to talk a little bit about how it's been really interesting to see how this podcast has grown. And you and I have had some discussions, you know, as this thing develops, as our idea of doing a podcast specifically for the nightclub industry.
Well, and your idea, because it wasn't mine, but I was on board because it's something I had never done, and you have done the work, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I really have taken to the idea of podcasting is just because it's really a neat way to learn and to get information. And what I like about it is it's something that you can do while you're on the go. So, you know, I spend a lot of time in the gym. I spend a lot of time in the car. I said a lot of time in the gym. I really don't spend a lot of time in the gym. I'm not like a meathead or buff. But, you know, as you're doing other things around the house, it's a cool way to get information, and it makes really good use of idle time, or what would otherwise be idle time.
And to that exact point, last week when I was in DC training, one of the guys came up during the breaks, and he had seen on our opening slide, reminding people to like us on Facebook, find our blog, listen to our podcast, that type of stuff. And he came up during the first break and said, "Hey, you know what? I've read a couple of your articles, but I don't have the time to sit and pull them up on your page, read them. But the podcast was great. He listened to the 2 episodes ago. He's now linked in on iTunes because he can listen to it on his commute, on the subway, on the train, the metro, or driving. And he said it's just the best way.
It's just a good way of making productive use of your time. So if you're not into like listening to podcasts, and there's a lot of information out there. I mean, you can jump on iTunes, and we are on iTunes. In fact, if you just search Nightclub Security, we're the first thing that pops up. So you can find us there. But any other area of interest, hobbies, you know, news, entertainment, there's just a lot of good quality content that's being provided for people for free. And it's an amazing way to make some great use of your time. So on that note, you know, if you're listening to us, we'd like to ask you to share us with a friend. Help get us out there as far as, you know, passing us along to friends, family, coworkers that would be interested in this content.
And it's a unique medium. I'm telling you, if you're listening, you already know about podcasts. If you're listening and this is your first one because you found us, we tipped you off on it, or someone else did, great, thank you. But it's new and it will take some time. I'm telling you, in the couple of months we've been doing these, I never listened to a podcast before this. Before I did my first one with Manny, I never listened to him. And now I find myself searching out different things I can listen to when I'm driving because, again, it's new and it's different. Just like bouncer training is new and different, and people are slowly grasping that concept, the podcast concept is still fairly new, and it takes a little time for you to really grab it.
Yeah, and, you know, as far as our listenership that we have right now, I've been really surprised to see how this thing has taken off. You know, we started with just an episode. We really didn't know what we were doing. And as we go through this process, we're getting a little bit better with each show. But we have listeners, you know, we've said it before, in Australia, Alaska. I saw a download from India come in, and it's been really neat to see this thing grow. And I'd really like to ask for our listenership to help spread the word. We just want to be a good resource and be available for people in our industry.
That would be really great. I mean, I hate to say it like this, but that would be very nice of you if you're listening, just to take a minute while you're listening, sit your ass down at the computer again and forward our page or the link to the podcast you're on to someone you know in the industry.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate it. So, Robert, we'll get on with the news topics for this week. Some interesting news. There's actually quite a few stories going on out there in the news, but probably the one that's most prevalent with what we're talking about in our industry is the shooting that happened in Las Vegas. Why don't you go ahead and fill us in on the details of what happened and what developed?
This past Saturday morning, about 5:20, the gentleman, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to tell you he's a prior convicted felon. He has a couple of assault issues in his past at nightclubs within the Vegas area. This morning at about 5:20, he walks into Bally's going to an after-hours venue at Dre's. And although it's a great place, they're open to 9 a.m., you got to be a certain type of person to be up that late all night. And typically it's not the sober, straight, arrow person heading out at 5:20 in the morning to go to this after-hours club.
That's what time I go out.
Well, other than being in the gym, that's where you're heading out. So he walks up and he says, okay, there's a few people here, and he asks to get inside to look, to see. And the guard at the door, the bouncer, says, sure. So he walks in, takes a look around, comes back out, and decides to pay the $30 cover. Pays his $30 cover and goes back in. A few minutes later, he comes back out saying, hey, I want my cover back. I don't want to stick around. There's some dialogue there, and that's not out yet. All the police know it, and the club people know it. It's not out in public record yet, but you can imagine the dialogue between that guy and the manager of the venue. Somehow, within the next 5 minutes, it gets very heated. He decides to pull out his gun that he's carrying. He shoots one of the bouncers in the arms and tries to run off. As he's leaving, another guard confronts him, and that security guard gets shot in the stomach. As soon as he turns to run from that shooting, an uninvolved patron who's there outside the venue jumps him, and they start wrestling, and he gets shot several times. His name is Patron, just a patron who saw this, is Kenneth Brown, and he was killed right there on the casino
just a
floor.
guy that was a passerby, saw things going on, stepped in to help.
And that's true, but he's got a connection with the industry. Not that he worked at Dre that I know of or anyone else has said, but he's also a part-time club promoter and a part-time stand-up comedian. So he's probably there enjoying the night, going to the after-hours venue, maybe helping promote, maybe not, maybe seeing what they're doing. He sees what went on. He hears the shooting, doesn't run, and he tackles the shooter while the shooter still has a gun in his hand.
So probably he's a friend of the industry. Maybe he has some people that he knows that works inside the club.
I would almost bet once this comes out, the story comes out, and remember, it's only Saturday. This was only a few days ago. I bet he did security work as a bouncer, as a door host, as an ID checker somewhere along the line in his career.
And thought, I got to step in to help.
And he did. And his stepping in probably delayed the shooter from getting away, either being confronted by guards when he was ready to shoot them, but other guards, as he was getting up from this killing, they subdued him. Casino guards came and took him down and made the arrest, and he's in jail now. But we wanted to bring this type of story to you because initially a guy comes out and says, hey, and I've seen it happen at other venues. Hey, how's your crowd? Oh, we got a good crowd. Do you mind if I come take a look? And then I'll pay the cover if I want to stay. It's done all the time. Could this have been avoided if they gave him back his cover? I don't want to cut in on what Dre's policy is. But after reading what happened and talking to someone out there about the circumstances, they let him in free. He came back out and said, okay, I want to stay. That's it. All right, we'll take your money now. He goes in and stays a little while and then comes out. We're not going to give your money back. We let you in free. And that's just that.
Yeah,
So,
chances are he probably paid the cover, went back in. I'm guessing he probably had a cocktail. Decided at some point that this thing's whack. I don't want to stay here. I just spent $30. I'm feeling like a victim. I want my money back. I'll go approach him. And then some sort of confrontation unfolds.
And absolutely, it is within Dre's right not to give that cover back. I'm not questioning that. It's just, we, at the company, when I started this, I wanted to be able to look at an incident like this and armchair quarterback it. Second guess what happened just to get people smarter. Whether they did everything right or they did some things wrong, that's not what we're saying. We just want to be able to talk about it openly. I wonder if this would have changed the dominoes as they fell.
Yeah, and when I read a story like this, or actually when I read this story, and I was thinking to myself, okay, how would I have acted as a manager or a security guard? And chances are that my standard protocol is, you know what, bud, you came in, you paid it. I'm not going to give you a refund. This is why we charge a cover is to make money. We're a business. All of a sudden you change your mind. And, it's like the person who sits down at a restaurant, eats, 3/4 of their meal and says, I don't like this.
Well,
It's hard for a manager or any logical person to
But throw in one added element. Okay, he comes in and orders a beer. He says, hey, I'd like to try that new ale. Okay, but here, let me give you a taste of it first, just in case. So you give him a sample, and he tastes it, and he says, hey, this is good. I'd like one.
Yeah, so all things in the story leading up to the shooting would lead me to behave in the same manner. It's like, this guy's not going to get his money back. And as we do this, what you call armchair quarterbacking, and we're looking at it after the fact, and we don't know all the details of the situation. But I tell you what I will pull away from this is I'm going to give myself a second chance to think this through and who I'm dealing with before I say no. And what I'm saying is I would have looked at this guy and I would have tried to further assess what he's capable of. And, the decision, maybe I would have gone with the same decision and said no, but maybe I would have second guessed myself and said, you know what? It's not worth any sort of confrontation for $30. Chances are this is a one-off. I'll call it a cost of doing business. $30, be on your way.
And if we knew to keep that attitude, what if I told you that on any given night at that location, they get 20 people asking for their cover back? Would you still have that and evaluate him the same way? Or would maybe you fall into the same thing of, if you only got 1 in 100 asking, let's evaluate this person and maybe give it back?
Well, if it's 1 in 100, if it's something that doesn't happen that often, if this is a rarity, then what's really the cost if I go ahead and give him $30 back?
Right.
If this is happening multiple times a night, well, then I really got to assess, am I dealing with a male, a female? What size is he or she? What sort of clothing are they wearing? Could they be concealing a weapon? So you go through a list of analysis and say, what am I really dealing with? And is there a risk factor involved here? And if so, base your decision on that.
Move to the gentleman that died, Mr. Brown, that died. I got to tell you, from 20 years as a cop, we always told people, don't get involved unless you have to. Be the best witness you can. Let the police do their job. It's kind of hard to say that Mr. Brown would not, Kenneth Brown wouldn't be alive today had he stayed back, didn't get involved. Local authorities there, casino people, and God bless the guy, he's now gone, are praising him as a hero. Okay, but he's dead. And I got to tell you, if you're listening, and if you think you can make the decision right then to jump in or not, great. And if you think your decision is to jump in and grab a guy, great, grab him. But remember the potential consequence. And Mr. Brown made a split-second decision. He is now dead. And I got to think that had he not jumped in and been the best witness, maybe followed this guy, continued to be a witness, watched where he went, direction, whatever, he'd still be alive.
Yeah, and it's really hard to make a judgment on somebody on their actions because it's you're acting in split seconds. You have the adrenaline rushing. It was very apparent that this guy wanted to help, and he tried, and he's on the losing end of it.
And remember, that's what second guessing and being comfortable and sitting here alive in studio and looking at something that happened, we can do that. And that's what I hope you do when you read our articles, you listen to our podcasts, you come to my training. It's about opening your mind and thinking, what would I have done? What could we do different? And hopefully next time things might be done differently.
So with this story, we're going to put a link to an article that you were...
The Las Vegas Sun called me the next day. I was in Tampa flying back to San Diego. They called me Sunday. Hey, want to know what's going on? Can you talk to us about this? Actually, it was Monday because they didn't really get the story till noontime on Sunday. And we did an interview over the phone. We talked again, and the article's out there now with some of my comments, so we'll post that.
So we'll post a link to that. Has there been any more development in the story?
No, they identified the guy. They'll keep everything pretty close for a while. It's very typical They're gonna charge him with. They're already going to charge him with capital murder. They're going to charge him with assault with intent to commit murder. They'll charge him with a weapons violation. They'll charge several things. But none of the video. Now imagine you're in a casino. There's going to be a ton of video here. They just haven't released anything. They haven't released the statements, and that's all standard. Nothing will come out. Not only will the reporters have to dig more to get more, but nothing should be said yet. Keep this tight. Someone died. Let's get this case solid before people start talking.
Okay. So we had one more story that we wanted to talk about as well, and this is more interesting than anything. There's a couple things we can pull away from it, but basically what the story is it's coming out of South Africa, and it's a video-based story where a guard that was what seems to be he was working as a temporary or fill-in guard had a confrontation with 3 men in the restroom of the club. He lands up hitting one of the men on suspecting that they've been using drugs in the bathroom. After the incident happens, they're watching it on the recording of it. He records a video of what he's seeing on the screen, proceeds to post that on Facebook, and then it makes a comment that this is what happens, something to the extent of this is what happens when you do drugs in my club. So it's a really actually shocking video. And Robert, you've seen it.
Yeah, and my first take on it was what an ass, what a jerk.
Because we'll put the video online, but the manner in which and the force in which he hits this kid.
Yeah, and anyone who's been through my courses, there's some unique guidelines that are very crystal clear, and you can take them and make them cloudy if you want. But this kid showed no threat. He was not aggressive in any way. And to me, it looks like, although he was accused of, no evidence of this, but in the article it talks about the bouncer says he was accused of using some sort of narcotic, either methamphetamine or cocaine or something. But you can see the video leading up to it, and it looks like he's smoking a joint and sharing it with one of his friends in the bathroom, like a foyer to the bathroom. And the guard comes around the corner and just sucker punches him in the face, knocking him to the ground, and I think knocking him out for about 5 seconds.
You know what I think it was is, and I'm just guessing here, when he comes around the corner to hit this kid, I'm thinking he's in the stall, and these patrons don't know that he's in the bathroom. He hears this activity going on, comes out of the stall and just clocks this kid. After clocking this kid, he proceeds, his two friends that are there with him, they get a couple smacks upside the head. It looks kind of like a
well, and the guard claimed. Remember, we're armchair quarterbacking and looking at possible other issues here. The guard later claimed, or the club later claimed, he wasn't working for us, something like that.
Yeah. So the club, which is Stones, it's in 4 ways. This is a South African club. They're claiming that this guy doesn't work for us, yet somehow he's working in the capacity of enforcing drug use in the bathroom. Somehow he gets access to the closed TVs and is able to record the video. In the video, you see him yelling out of the bathroom, calling for help.
After he smacks the first guy, punches him, he goes to the door and opens the door and yells out for someone to come in. The door shuts. He goes back to the victim laying on the ground. The 2 friends of the victim try to leave. That guard stops them, goes to the door again and yells for someone else. Everything that Manny said and that I saw in the video leads me to believe without a doubt he's working for the club.
There's
even his shirt.
There's some sort of expectation that this guy is
some sort of, whether he's working as a bathroom attendant, whether he is a guard outside the door and just was in the bathroom doing his business, doesn't matter. But to me, there is no doubt he's working for the club.
So a couple things to pull away from this. One would be, I think there's probably a lot of bars, nightclubs that will have individuals working for them on a fill-in capacity. I'm guessing that when clubs and bars do this, they probably don't fully vet who's working for them. You can also assume that that person filling in doesn't have a clear understanding of the policies, procedures, or what is allowed and not allowed, proper training. What else, Robert?
What management expects and expects them to do and not to do. If this guy was a part-time guy and he's just filling in, I doubt management said, hey, by the way, we just don't want you blowing up on people. If you see a problem, notify someone else. Go get some help. I bet they didn't tell him that, and he just took it on his own to do what he did.
Yeah, so this is probably some guy doesn't have a full understanding of what he's allowed to do and not allowed to do. He's probably a buddy of one of the guys at the club, and we need an extra body. Come on in. We'll put a T-shirt on you. pay you $50, $60 on our table. You're working for us for the
And
night.
when you see the video, if you go to our site and you'll get it, you'll be able to watch it. It's the shirt he's wearing the typical, muscle bound medium shirt.
Yeah, this is a big
showing
guy.
his guns, and he clocks this guy in the face hard, knocking him out. So the things Manny mentioned are important, but many of your places will bring a guy in, and we're just past Halloween. We're coming up on some other party nights for people doing buyouts of your venue, whether it's for Christmas parties or what other holiday parties they may be having. Remember, if you're augmenting your staff with a guy from a security company or a guy from next door or your brother-in-law, fill them in on what you want to do and be specific. Don't be punching anyone. Don't hit anyone. If you get a fight, obviously break up the fight as best you can, but get help.
I would even go so far as you're an extra set of eyes. Don't get involved. You have a contact person who actually works for the club. You bring him in to help, or bring in him to make the decisions on how to handle the situation.
And both Manny and I know you're going to augment your staff at one time, whether it is New Year's Eve or whatever. You're going to need extra guards. Well, plan ahead. Consider these guards untrained. Consider them unknowledgeable, and plan ahead. Be ready for a mistake like this. Hopefully you roll the dice and nothing happens, but be prepared for when it does.
One other thing that I wanted to say about this is, a lot of times when management does something like this, they make a decision to bring someone in like this. Part of you has this, I think it's part denial, but you're like, oh, this guy knows better. And when something like this happens, you've obviously assumed wrong. So don't leave it to chance. Address it. Put it out there. Part of management is you have to list your expectations. If you don't list your expectations and somebody does something that is not allowed, that's on management.
We just went over that in our last podcast. If you want to go back and again, go to iTunes and get what's it called? A member?
No, subscribe.
subscribe on iTunes, and listen to our last one about hiring. And one of the points we talk about is getting that new guy brought up to speed. And until he's brought up to speed, or until they're brought up to speed, you don't trust it. Don't risk it.
Do you have any other comments on this story?
No, I just hate seeing videos like this, just like the one we did a month ago or so in Blondies from Florida.
What's funny is, as we're talking about this, you could take this video, a minute and a half, and we could probably dissect it, and we'd have an hour of conversation around this little piece of information. And this is what we like to do here: is we like to take real world real world experiences and incidents and be able to learn from them, because that's
remember, we do these podcasts to give you information. We do the blog to get you information. Our website is chock full of information. Our training has more information than you'll ever get anywhere. And that's the purpose, to bring you up to a higher standard and talking about these things where they've never been talked about before, other than making jokes and showing your buddy this guy getting knocked out. Well, discussing it will make change, and that's what we're all about.
And we can learn from it. So, Robert, today's show, when we get into it, we're going to take a little break here, but today's show, we're going to talk about cops working as security guards in a bar or nightclub environment. And we had a hard time trying to decide on a title for this, but that's the basic premise. And we'll come back, we'll talk about it, the good, the bad, the pros, the cons. So we'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for joining us on our weekly podcast. Please like us on Facebook at Nightclub Security Consultants. All right, and welcome back. Today's show is going to be about cops working as security guards inside your bar or nightclub. Now, we know a lot of cities will actually allow police officers to work in a private environment. Robert, there's two different ways this happens. What are those?
Well, and since I became a cop, I was aware of this going on. And I didn't really know what to think about it. I never had the opportunity. In the city of San Diego, they don't allow cops to work in either capacity. And this is what Manny's talking about. There's two capacities that we're talking about. Number one, the cop is off duty on his day off, their day off, and they're going to work at Joe's Bar. They throw on a Joe's Bar polo shirt, and they're now off-duty cop working for Joe's Bar. They're still a cop, but they're off duty on their day off working at Joe's Bar. City of San Diego has never allowed that where I worked. Some cities do allow that, to go pick and choose where you want to work off duty. I think that is an absolute negative and should never be done. We're not talking about that in this podcast.
So, real quick, when you work in a police department, typically in a city, just for clarification, generally when you work another occupation or job, you have to have clearance from...
Most large departments, or even small ones that went through something, they will create a policy that says if you want to work off duty, you can, but you have to get permission first.
Now, is that in any capacity? Like if...
In any capacity. If you wanted to be a barber or be a tree trimmer as a police officer on your off-duty time, you have to submit an outside work request. And this is, again, in general terms, most police departments have something in place like this. And if you're a cop listening to this, if you're a supervisor and you don't, you probably know you've had some trouble with off-duty employment. And that's why police departments implement these policies. You submit your request, your immediate supervisor signs off, your second level, third level, all the way to the chief's office will sign off that you can work at this location. And they do that for an obvious reason. If you want to be a bouncer at a bar and that bar is on the radar of the police that they're selling drugs, they're having fights, there's a gun problem there, you don't want your cop working there because it's an obvious conflict of interest. And maybe they're involved, maybe they're not, but you don't want them there. So what we're talking about today is not that. The off-duty officer working on a Friday night as a bouncer. What we're discussing today are the officers that they're done with their shift. They get off at 9 p.m. and Manny and I are cops. We get off at 9. We log out, but then we roll in our police unit to the local bar that we're signed up or assigned to work, and we go to work at that bar, meaning we just stand outside. We're in full uniform, have our vest on, all our leather gear, and we're standing outside the door of that venue or sitting in our car or leaning on our car, a door down. We're just assigned to that bar for the night, a 5 or 6 hour shift. That's what we're going to discuss as an off-duty detail or off-duty officers.
So, and the reason why we're bringing up this topic, or why it's the topic of this show is this is on the heels of a blog that you recently wrote, and we're going to kind of surmise the blog in this podcast. But when a cop comes in and works for a bar or nightclub in an instance like that, who's picking up the tab?
The bar is. And here's how it would work, Manny, just so if listeners, if you know this already, bear with us because there may be some nuances city to city. Typically, the best way it's done, and I've seen it in a couple of cities, the city has an office for outside employment. Manny is a bar manager. He would contact that office. He would say, I would like 2 officers to work at my bar on Friday and Saturday nights from 9 p.m. till closing, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. The city office, the supervisor in that office would look on their board, find officers that are willing to work at a bar, work on those hours, work on those days, and assign Manny a 2-officer unit to work at his door. He would send an agreement to Manny. Manny would sign that agreement that we agree to pay X amount of dollars, and they would write the check once every 2 weeks or once a month to the city of whatever city, a check from the bar to the city for the amount that they're owed those officers.
And what sort of per hour amount are we talking about?
Remember, these officers are off duty, and if you're following all the labor law practices, they're working a 40-hour work week. They're working now an extra 10, 20 hours at your bar. So you will pay time and a half, plus anything the city wants to tack on for wear and tear on the vehicle, workman's comp injuries, uniforms, weapons, anything they want to tack on extra. So on a typical mid-level city, it's going to run you anywhere from $40 an hour to a high-level city where it's up to $100 an hour for one officer. Multiply those numbers by 2. Multiply those hours by 10 for just 2 5-hour shifts. It's a lot of money.
So cities that allow this, is there motivation? Is this a moneymaker for them?
It's not so much a moneymaker for the city. For example,
or are they marketing this as an added service?
Well, they're looking at it a couple of ways. Number one, the standard mindset among, and look, I've never been a chief of police, so if we've got a chief listening, we'd love to hear from you on this point. I've picked the brains of several chiefs across the country on this point. So I'm coming from a pretty strong standpoint here. However, if we get disagreements on this, please, we encourage some input from anyone out there that has personal issues with this as a chief or a commanding officer somewhere. They see it as another tool to limit the number of calls they get to a certain location or bar. So if I can assign or allow Manny and Robert to work at bar X, I shouldn't be getting any violent calls there. Because on a normal week, I'm probably getting 1 or 2, whether it's a 911, somebody's purse was stolen, there's a fight, the bartender can't make someone leave. But with police officers there, those crimes or types of responses should be eliminated because those 2 cops can handle it. We're not having to pay for them as a city. The bar's paying for them. So we're making out. Now we don't have to send a beat unit from 3 blocks away to drive into the city, downtown, park their car, and deal with that problem and maybe out of service for 2 or 3 more hours. We've got unassigned, off-duty officers working the front door that can deal with that problem. So the city makes out, their officers can stay on the street. The bar makes out, supposedly they have fewer problems. The police make out because they're off-duty working in a capacity making time and a half to sit outside of a bar. The community makes out because the police are out in the street. Everybody should be happy with this program.
So on the surface, there's a lot of positives that come from off-duty police officers working in a bar or nightclub.
On first analysis, there's a ton of positives.
So in your article, you also address some of the negative effects.
Well, I do a pro and con because with every pro...
Again, we'll put the link to the blog on our show notes for today.
And also, again, I really mean that. If you use officers, you have an alternate view. If you don't use them and your city's thinking about it, 2 of the longest standing cities that I know of that I've worked in have done is Tampa, Dallas. I know DC does it and have been doing it for a long time. And there's certain nuances for each city. However, the core of what's done is the same. And you'll read it in my blog and you'll hear it today.
So on the negative side, and actually before we go to the negative side, Robert, overall, what is your opinion of using cops as security?
I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
All right. So that'll become apparent as we go through this conversation. What are the things you don't like about it?
Well, and it will be apparent, but we're going to give you both sides. I want to make sure I do that. Even though I'm telling you up front I don't like it, I'm going to tell you why. One of the good things that we talk about is cops there because it's a great visual deterrent. If you get antisocial trouble people that are going to walk to your door, they see cops, logically, they won't be antisocial. They won't do anything wrong.
So just by the mere fact that you have cops sitting outside, it's going to mitigate anyone's desire or thought to do something stupid.
Correct.
Create a problem.
Correct. But remember, that guest is now inside the club. He's having some drinks. He's had a few excessive drinks. Now he's starting to act inappropriate. Nearly every policy I've reviewed across the country does not allow the cops to go into the bar. Their job is to stay out front, and unless it's some over-the-top major emergency, they don't run into the bar to handle a drunk at the side of the bar. That's the bouncer's job. That's the bartender's job. And once this customer who's been unruly inside is outside, that's when the cops deal with him. So, okay, we got a visual deterrent when he's sober. Well, he's not going to do anything when he's sober outside in line. When he gets inside after 3 hours of drinking, now he starts to be stupid. That's the place where the cops should be inside. But the con of having them is they can't go inside unless they're requested for some other reason. So now the guards still have to deal with the drunk. And the guard says, hey, you got to go. You can't do this. Go outside. And we still have to deal with that element of getting the guest outside for the police to deal with him. So there's my pro and my con there of just having him at the door.
You know, and I think about this as from a manager standpoint, and there's been often times when I've been working where just the mere sight of a cop in a uniform squashes all the problems. And, you know, in San Diego, like you said, we didn't have this sort of program in place, but, you know, in the busy entertainment districts like the Gas Lamp here in San Diego, you would often have a cop just, you know, in a stone throw away, and you could easily walk up to him and say, hey, can you help me out with this? So I could see that as being the pro of like just the mere appearance of a cop. All right, problem solved.
Now, let me give you the other con on that. Many operators say, look, having cops in front, they scare away my clients. I don't want the cops out there. So I'm not going to use them. If I need them, I'll call them. We can handle things okay, but I don't want that appearance to scare off my clients. I'm not saying right or wrong, or that operator must be trying to hide something. They take it as having police around. My clients won't enjoy themselves enough because now they're worried the police are out there. Whether it's drunk driving, whether it's some baloney traffic warrant, the operator is still worried that, yeah, I know I could use them, but I don't want to because my clients feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm guessing that bars or restaurants or nightclubs that don't like that are probably more in a rural setting where there's drive-up customers. I'm thinking most rational people like to see a cop hanging out because they feel a little bit safer, but it's probably, the normal law-abiding citizen. The one thing he doesn't like is, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to have a couple of drinks. When I leave, I'm going to jump in my car. The cop's going to see me right there. That's why they don't like it.
Correct. Remember, and that's pro and that's a con of having, whether you're in a small town, big city, and I know there are small towns within our county, in San Diego County, that use off-duty police officers, and even the ones that don't, that are in smaller areas, not like the Gas Lamp or in the Pacific Beach, a police unit will drive across the street and sit there, and the operators are like, what the hell? The cop's sitting across the street again. And the cop's doing it for a reason, but again, it scares the customers.
Yeah, and I think the operator who doesn't like it because it's a deterrent to his clientele, it's not necessarily because his clientele is a bunch of, roughnecks who are dealing drugs or, gangs or whatever. It's probably just your normal average individual who just doesn't want to be seen jumping in his or her car.
Another pro of having these guys there, the officers there, is every bar in the country will eventually have their record reviewed, meaning their calls for police service. Does your bar isn't a nuisance? Do you have a lot of calls? Do you have trouble? Well, one of the pros of this is we don't have to call 911. We've got the cops there already, and they're not getting on their radio and calling for other units. Okay. Well, when you do get reviewed, most of the time the city doesn't care about the purse being stolen, the cell phone that was taken, the misdemeanor assault where the victim doesn't want to do anything and leaves and isn't hurt in a major way, and the victim is the suspect is made to leave. But in this case, you've got police there, and you better know that if there's an issue that needs to be taken care of, they're going to take care of it, and that call for service will still go on your record. So don't think that the pro of having them there is we don't ever have to call the cops, that they're there. Well, when they need to do something, handle a violent felony, handle a large theft, they're going to call that case in, and it's still, whether they puts it out on the radio or it's on their computer terminal, it still goes down as a call for service to your...
So just because it's not a physically picking up the phone, putting it to your ear, making a call, that isn't necessarily...
The report still lists your address as the bar, and it goes on your account.
So it's the event that makes it a call, not just the actual call. Okay.
That's right.
What else on the pros and cons?
A lot of operators say, I'm glad we have them because when we do have an issue, we can have them arrest the suspect, the suspect, the guest that was over the top violent. Okay, that's a great thought. And theoretically, and this is my biggest hang up because I've seen it in every city. You get a guest inside, he's antisocial. He wasn't swayed to do something different outside when he saw the cops. He's got a couple of drinks in him. He doesn't want to leave the bar. The guards put their hands on him legally. As they're walking him out, he pushes a guard. The guard wraps him up. The guest hits another guard. You have a lawful assault by the guest. The guards walk the guest out. And what should be done? What should be done, Manny? You've got two officers standing outside of your club. Your guards were just assaulted twice by this guest. What should be done?
Well,
just give me what do you think should be done? You as the manager, your guards were assaulted.
You want to press charges.
Okay.
You want a report to be written.
Okay. Well, what if the officers just worked their fourth day of a 10-hour shift? This is their Friday night. It may be your Saturday, it may be your Tuesday, but they've already worked 40 hours of work in their uniform, taking reports, responding to calls, and now they're on their second night of overtime at your bar. It's 1 a.m. They're getting ready to go home for their first real day off, their only day off, and they've got to arrest someone, deal with the drunk, fight with him, Write a 3-hour report? What do you think you want to do about that?
Well, being realistic and what's going to happen, because I mean, I think every manager, even in security, can sympathize with this. The last thing you want to do after a long week or a long night is sit down and have to think about writing a report. So it's human nature. These guys are spent. They're probably in their mindset. This is a easy money gig for me. I'm going to make some extra cash. I'll lean against the car. I'll look at the pretty girls in short skirts. This will be kind of my social outlet. This is my easy part of my job.
Correct.
The last thing I want to do is
do paper.
Go
to jail, impound property, take the guy's wallet, find more dope in his shoe, impound the dope, more charges. You don't want to do any of that. Have the report approved.
And the thing, one point I want to make is that we're not talking bad about the individuals doing this role. This is human nature. This is being realistic.
Correct. So now you've got your guards lawfully assaulted. You want to have some sort of consequence. They didn't use too much force. They did it right. And now you get the guy out to the officers, and the officers say, well, I didn't really see this happen, so I'm not sure that I can really do anything. Well, officers, my guards are telling you they were assaulted. Look, his eye is getting black and blue. The other guy's lip is cut. Well, the victim, and the cops will say that, your victim, the suspect, says you guys grabbed him for no reason, and he was just trying to defend himself. Look, operators or workers, if you're listening to this, you can laugh out loud if you want, because I know many of you have heard this same line from the police where they'll tell you, look, do you really want this guy arrested? He's telling me that you pushed him or grabbed him first. No, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know. I can arrest him, but he wants you arrested too. So you tell me what you want done. And the end result is?
That deters them from...
No report. I don't need to be a victim. Just make him leave, and the cops take the suspect's information down and make him walk away. Now there's no report. There's no consequence. And you as a manager walk away thinking, son of a... Why am I paying these guys $55 an hour to make the guy leave? I could have made him leave. You're really kind of up against a wall too, because they're also your regulators.
Well, and we keep pressing the idea that you want them to file a report. You want them to make the arrest. And the reason why we like going that route is because why, Robert?
Well, you put your hands on them, and if there's a lawsuit and you get sued, you're going to want the documentation from the officers out there. And what ends up happening in this case, this guy does sue, because let's just say your guards did everything right, but his shoulder hurts. And 20 months later, he files a lawsuit. He went to urgent care. He got some therapy. He missed a couple of days of work, and he's suing for $100,000. You're going to have to put your hand up and swear an oath and tell the truth. And they're going to ask you, did you have him arrested? And what are you going to say, Manny?
No, we didn't.
You didn't, but you had the police right there, didn't you? You could have had him arrested, but you didn't, did you?
No.
This wasn't that serious, was it?
Well, it was serious.
Well, it wasn't that serious. You would have had him arrested.
So you kind of see what we're getting at with why it's good to have the arrest made and the police report made. Now, I understand. I've been in the same situation hundreds of times to where you have to make the decision, and I totally get the idea where managers, you know what, I just want this guy to go away. I want to get on with my night, and I want to get through the next 4 hours till close and wrap this show up so I can get home and get some sleep. I totally get it, but just the thought to think of in those situations is you're rolling the dice, because if a lawsuit comes in down the line, you really don't have all the information, all the documentation you need to protect yourself against what could be a frivolous lawsuit.
A ridiculously frivolous lawsuit, because you did everything right. It doesn't mean that, remember what we said in our prior podcast. Again, if you haven't listened, go back. You're always liable. Your liability window is never closed, and you're always liable. They can sue for anything. But if you have done everything right, that mitigates the possibility of damages. And having the police make a lawful arrest of a guy that assaulted two of your guards, one of your guards, a server, is vital. Now, one of the things that no one likes to talk about, and no one likes to say this to the police, and I know why, because as a bar, a club, you answer to the police. They're your regulators, and you don't want to piss your regulator off. Well, here's the solution. The cops don't make the arrest. They try to put one against the other. He said, she said, and I wasn't there, and they want you to just let him go. And you get your manager involved, and your manager should say, officer, I know you're busy. I'm sorry. I'd like to see your supervisor. There are many other things they could say. Hey, officer, we have witnesses you didn't talk to. We have video you didn't see. We have other guards and other employees you didn't talk to. I don't think you need to arrest our guards. I think that's the suspect spouting, lies. You can make the decision, but if you want to arrest our guards, we need to see your supervisor. Now the sergeant's going to roll to that complaint that you just made. Yes, that's a complaint. But remember, the sergeant is a middle manager. They want what is supposed to be done right. They don't want to be drawn into this. The bottom line is the officer should make that arrest of that guest. If they need to go to jail, take them to jail. If they can be issued a summons or a citation, issue it and be on their way. They don't need to do all this, but they do because they're humans. It's a long night. It's extra work. Well, I'm sorry, tough tacos. You asked to do the job. You're getting paid time and a half. Make the damn arrest. And it's management's job, not the guard. And you can guard if you want. Speak to the supervisor. Make that complaint, and I guarantee you'll see something different. Typically, the sergeant will call the officer and talk to him. Then the officer will look at the video, talk to the witnesses, and all of a sudden your report's taken. The guest still won't go to jail, but the report's been taken and your butt's covered.
Yeah. So you have some more points, Robert, as far as pros and cons. Let's highlight the ones that are most important.
Well, we talked about most of the ones that are the most important, but the negative that I see is the expense. I look at when I talk to operators and I do training, I look at the reward for what you're doing, the risk versus reward, or the reward for your actions. And, my figures I used on the blog were for 2 officers, and you're paying plus, total for 2 officers to work a 5-hour shift on a Friday and Saturday, standard pay rates at a time and a half. You're looking at $550 a weekend. That's for the 2. That's
pricey.
That's $2,000 a month that you're putting out there to get cops to stand outside. And I'm telling you, some of you people are shaking your head. Yeah, you've had cops stand out there and not do a damn thing for you. Look, cops, I'm sorry if you listen to this. I love you. I love being one. But it's a job. You're being asked to do it. And if you got to make the arrest of someone who they find ecstasy in her purse, make the ecstasy arrest. Don't just put them on the ground and stomp on them. I saw that. And the cops made her leave when they destroyed her medicine, her ecstasy rather. Find a gun on a guy inside. Make the arrest. I saw the cops impound it as found property and make the guy leave. You got to make those arrests because the club is a taxpayer just like anybody else.
So overall, there could be some initial benefits as far as bringing on off-duty police officers to work at your place. The last point you made as far as being, being an expense is, that's for smaller to medium-sized operator, $2,000 a month that's a big chunk of change. There might be some larger venues or big nightclubs that can afford a bill like that on a weekly or monthly basis. But I think that sort of resource, that amount of money could be used to either staff up or to properly train your staff to deal with these situations.
And that's what I recommend. Look, if you work in a business district and they want to put 5 officers for 3 blocks, great. And you're all paying into the same fund. And if you decide they're not doing anything for you, but you don't need them as much, okay, live with that. But if you're in some cities, I know where the cops are mandated to work at a bar that has a felony complaint. So the bar gets a felony arrest at the bar, and it's the only complaint they've had. Now they've got to have 2 off-duty cops working there every Friday and Saturday. That's a lot of money. As Manny just said, my thought is to hire the extra guards, pay them what you pay them, train them up correctly, and they'll be doing the right thing. And if you need to call the cops, you call the cops. If you don't, you don't. But having them there as a deterrent, I just don't see it. And here's the for me, as a former cop, the biggest deterrent to have cops working the door, it makes them open to being tainted, dirty. Even if they're not dirty, they're not going to take money, they're not going to take this, they're not going to do the wrong thing. It may appear like it. And I just don't want that. I don't want the cops who are held to a higher standard to get mad at a drunk and push him 2 or 3 times down the sidewalk. That's assault. The officer can't do that just because he's a drunk, just like a bouncer, same standard. But you've seen You have seen cops, I have seen cops push them down the sidewalk until the drunk decides to leave. Now the cops are all thought of as thugs and bullies. Well, that's not what they are.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting points. There's a lot of nuances about, having cops work as guards or off-duty cops be present at your venue. What I'd like to do is I'd like to encourage the listeners to take a look at the blog. I'm also going to link, because there was actually an expose coming out of Florida that's related to this topic. But if you're in a situation to where you're thinking about using off-duty police officers, or you're currently using them, you have some questions, you use us as a resource. Our number, you can find it on the website, questions@nightclubsecurity.com. You can write in. So, we're here available. This is what we do. If you have a question, let us know. Robert, do you have anything else to add? I know this hour went by really quickly. Is there anything else you got to add for today's show?
No, I think it's an important topic, and it kind of came up because of some things I saw. Manny and I talked about it. We wanted to do this podcast on that topic, and take Manny's words. If you have issues, operators, guards, if you have issues with an off-duty detail, you want to discuss it. Look, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying know what you're getting in for. Cities, cops, if you're listening to this, know what you're getting in for, and don't be afraid to do the job.
All right, so I want to encourage our listeners to find us on our website, nightclubsecurity.com. We offer a range of services.
Training is our primary cornerstone of what we do. We have online training, the only job-specific online training in the country. We have the only job-specific in-person training in the country. We didn't mention, but I just came back from a 2-week trip training in D.C., Tampa, St. Louis, and back here in San Diego. We've got more coming up in California, but training is what we do. Whether it's in-person guard training, helping managers with their documentation, whether it's on-site reviews of your establishment, that's what we do.
And in regards to our online training, this is a really good program. This is not something that's hokey or thrown together. It's well formatted for managers that want to track the progress of their employees. They can do that through the online system. We also do the in-person, which of course is very dynamic. A weekend of training is worth so much for your employees. We also do just general consulting, expert witness and opinion. So if you need any of those services, please let us know. Reach out to us. What else, Robert?
I'm looking on my email. I wanted to throw a shout out. A gentleman, he just bought 10 of our new hire courses online. And understand what we have is about a 2-hour online new hire training course. And this doesn't mean that he bought 10 of these courses. He's got 10 employees going to send them to, and he might, but you can buy them at a discounted rate. I mean, they're $20 I think it's $20 or $30 a pop, but he bought a bulk. And I wanted to just throw a shout out because he's used them and he knows the value, and it's a great first step for any new employee, long-term employee, just to get the idea of what the legal issues are, the do's and don'ts of this job. And that's our new hire program. And you can get that on our website also. I can't find his info.
Yeah, so the new hire is basically it's a one topic course, and it's basically surrounds all the topics that you'd want to speak about, train your new hire.
A little bit of use of force, a little bit of liabilities, a little bit of rules and regulations, a little bit of IDs, just enough to whet their appetite to get them knowledgeable.
So yeah, that's available, as well as a host of other topics in training programs. Find us on Facebook. Make sure that you like us. We offer lots of tips on our page. Twitter, you can find us on Twitter as well. And again, if you have questions at nightclubsecurity.com. That's all for today's show. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another interesting show. My name is Manny Marquez.
I'm Robert Smith.
Be nice.